most people are back at work now and could probably do with a relaxing night's sleep, but I don't know if this will send you to sleep or give you nightmares. One of the two. But tonight I'm going to be doing some more of the true crime. 7 of the most brutal murders ever committed in the history of the human race. And the page I'm on is runawaynightmare.com. And it says the Murder Mac snuff tapes. And it's got a really creepy picture here with a man with fangs. But let's get started anyway. Sorry about that. Right. It's revised from Disguise of Sanity. They, Pittaker and Norris, lack the internal prohibitions or conscience that keep most of us from giving full expression to our most primitive and sometimes violent impulses. That's what the forensic psychiatrist Dr. Ronald Markham said in 1989. So, midnight Halloween, Shirley Ledford and friends catch a ride to their fast food job. The driver stops for fuel and asks the riders to pay for the gas so that they can go to the party. But Shirley is tired and instead walks home. A silver van follows Ledford for a moment, then stops directly in front of her. Smiling Roy Norris, on the passenger side, asks if she needs a lift. The girl enters the sliding door and Norris locks it shut, while the driver, Lawrence Pittaker, turns on the radio loud and heads to the Forest Lawn Cemetery. Ledford would have been safer had she merely fallen into a shark tank. The year before, while awaiting release from California men's colony in San Luis Obispo, I'm not sure how to say that, Lawrence Sigmund Pittaker and Roy Lewis Norris found they had something in common and made plans for their futures. Nothing too fancy, just a toolbox full of medieval agonies to be preserved in screams with a camera and sound recorder. Lawrence Pittaker moved to California with his foster parents in 1952 and was first arrested 5 years later at 17. Following more arrests and time in juvenile jails for burglaries and property crimes, he took a stolen car across several state lines until he was stopped in Missouri. After caged for 19 months in a federal pen, angry Larry Pittaker is now unleashed on the world. I will say, if you enjoy true crime and find this interesting, feel free to subscribe to me. Right. On the bus trip from prison back to Los Angeles, he got friendly with 4 children and their mother. He listened to the mother's problems, and before arriving in Compton, California, they were making wedding plans. Only days out of confinement, Pittaker He also scored near genius on his IQ test, but just didn't seem to learn from his mistakes. For the next 20 years, Whittaker was in and out of prisons for assault, burglary and grand theft auto. In 1975, he stabbed a Hollywood market checker in a robbery attempt, but just avoided homicide by missing the victim's heart with a knife strike. Whittaker told the judge, reviewing his probation, that prison was like home, and he might kill if released. That's the trouble. The more time people spend in prison, the less likely they are to live a normal life outside. But they should have listened to him. 3 years later, the state of California will gamble that Larry Whittaker had finally been rehabilitated, let loose again in LA. Whittaker gets a job as a machinist, lives in Burbank Motel, and waits for his prison pal Ray Norris to get out of the joint soon. Norris met Whittaker in 1977 while serving for a rape conviction, telling everyone who would listen how women had caused most of the problems in his life. It's not an excuse. Nothing's ever an excuse for that. Norris said that he liked to overwhelm women with fear and terror, just as they had always done to him. Within a month of his release, Norris raped again, this time dumping the girl in a desert. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital to get cured and was back on the streets in time to prepare, with Whittaker, the plans that they had discussed in prison. They brought plastic tape, pliers, rope, knives and an ice pick with other screen makers in a toolbox. They also brought a camera and a tape recorder. They drove into the mountains to find a nice quiet spot to do that would snare screams, finding a fire road just above Glendora. They knew too that dead targets tell no tales, and now it began. On June the 24th, 17-year-old Lucinda Schaefer was coming home from Bible study class in Torrance near the beach. Whittaker slowed his van, nicknamed Murder Mac, where Norris yelled to the girl if she wanted a ride and to smoke some dope. Cindy declined and continued walking. Norris jumped out and pulled Schaefer into the van, jamming a rag into her mouth and blinding her. Then he bound her wrists as Whittaker raced to the hills. Sick men. Arriving at their mountain hideaway, both men leisurely rape the girl, then discuss how she should die. Norris hedged against murder, but eventually agreed to kill her himself as Whittaker held Schaefer in place. He tried to strangle Cindy, but faltered when the girl started crying. Whittaker, who was now less moved by the girl's tears, tried to kill her, but told Norris it was a lot tougher than on television. Both men fastened a coat hanger around her neck and slowly tightened with a pair of pliers. That's absolutely horrible. Later, according to Norris's statement to the police, when first trying to kill Schaefer, he went out of the van and vomited. Whatever happened, Norris apparently got over his nervous compassion in time to murder the girl and go after the next target. When finished with Cindy, they carried her body to the but Bittaker wanted to experiment with more exotic agonies. There was a whole world of hitchhikers to him, to finally play out his hungry daydreams. He planned to eventually build a small town to imprison the kidnapped teenage girls. I'm not going to swear. Who the hell does something like that? They would remain naked, chained, tortured and forced into sex acts. Larry could finally feel like a real man, or something, with all those little girls screaming, scared, witless. While Bittaker's murder town was still on the blueprints, he went out looking for his next victim. Andreas Hall was itching and barely missed getting picked up by Bittaker, taking a ride with a car that stopped just ahead. But Bittaker and Norris followed the car carrying Andrea until she got out on a street corner. Then Bittaker offered her a ride and the poor girl got in. When he finished raping Hall, Norris went back down to the mountain road for food, leaving the girl with Bittaker, hearing sharp screams as he left. Norris brought back sandwiches and Bittaker gave him a stack of Polaroid photos. All were stages of Hall's pain and death. I told her I was going to kill her to see what kind of argument she'd have for staying alive, Bittaker said, gesturing to the mutilated girl. She didn't have much of an argument. Norris couldn't help noticing an ice pack plunged into her ear. Ice pick. Oh my god. It wasn't fatal though, Bittaker said. She also had to be strangled. It wasn't fatal, but not because he hadn't tried. He turned Hall over to do the same to the other ear, stomping with his foot until the ice pick penetrated completely and the handle broke. This is my first time reading this story and I'm starting to regret it. I feel like I want to cry. This is absolutely horrible. But the girl was still breathing until the wire snapped. Jackie Gilliam just happened to be hitchhiking when the murder Mac drove by. Gilliam was careful who she rode with, but after analysing blue-eyed and smiling Bittaker and bespectacled slap-happy Norris, she never thought the men would do anything more than carry her across town. Bittaker spotted another hitchhiker, 13-year-old Jacqueline Lamp, and loaded her beside Gilliam. When the girls realised that the van was going away from their destinations, they waited for a moment to escape. As the van slowed, Gilliam broke free and ran near a tennis court. Bittaker barely getting a hand on her, no one listening to her screams. Lamp was knocked unconscious by Norris as Gilliam passes out in the van while being tied by Bittaker. Both girls wake at the mountain graveyard where they begin 2 days of very slow death. Pictures are exposed of the girls in various stages of poses and tortures. I'm not going to put those pictures on here. I'm not going to look at them. If people want to, then they can Google them themselves, but I'm not doing that. Bittaker was getting more sophisticated at taking Polaroids and recording sounds to capture just the right terrified look, the high-pitched scream. The next morning, Norris asked Bittaker to kill Gilliam fast because she had been cooperative, but Larry wanted the long way of execution, saying they only die once anyway. As with Andreas Hall, he drove an ice brick through Gilliam's ears as fast as he could reach, and strangled her by a coat hanger and pliers. As Jackie Lamp fell out of the open side door of the van, he bludgeoned her to death with a sledgehammer. She wanted to stay a virgin, so she died a virgin. Bittaker told Norris as they threw the bodies down the ravine. Bittaker wanted another victim for his 38th birthday, and saw a girl jogging near the beach. She turned into a donut shop just as Norris was ready to grab her. They waited nearly an hour for the girl to get back onto the street, but she knew something inside and kept taking. I think that's supposed to say walking. Bittaker got bored and drove down the highway, slowing as he saw a girl walking by herself. Bittaker got out to follow her as Norris drove the van, but the girl abruptly went into the El Camino College parking lot. Bittaker manoeuvred the van to the side of the girl. Norris poised to spring out and abduct her, but she sensed danger and ran away. Not wanting his birthday to be completely wasted, he and Norris went to see a movie instead. 2 nights later, Bittaker follows a girl into the alleyway of her apartment. When she sees no witnesses, Bittaker sprays mace from a squirt gun at her face. He thought it would be better to catch a target, but the chemical agent only makes her scream louder. Bittaker and Norris drive to the street when several neighbours come running. One of them memorises the plate number. Good. Bittaker is arrested and initially charged with assault with a caustic chemical, but the rap gets dropped because mace is a chemical irritant and is not a caustic agent. The difference is considerable in both bail and possible sentencing. Bittaker gladly accepts the lighter charge of being an ex-con in possession of tear gas and walked out of the police station just in time for Halloween. The hell, why do they keep letting them go? They drive into the San Fernando Valley and pick up attractive Shirley Ledford, just 16, around midnight on Halloween. With Ledford secure, Bittaker asks Norris to drive while he attacks the girl in the back. Norris drove for 2 hours as Bittaker mutilated Ledford with pliers and hammer, running the recorder until it ran out of tape. Let's discuss. Go into every single detail that it says on here about the transcript of the tape, because it goes into some really graphic details, and I think that this girl had been through enough by being killed. She doesn't need me to go through and explain whereabouts they hurt her, because that's just not what I want to go into details. But one of the parts said that Ledford was saying, "My God, please stop," and she was screaming. And Bittaker said, "Is the recorder going?" Norris said, "Yeah." And Bittaker said, "Scream, baby, scream some more, baby." It's just vile. Norris drives along the Golden State Freeway, then trades places with Bittaker. On tape, Norris taunts the girl to scream, then cracks her arm with a sledgehammer, breaking her elbow, with Ledford screaming, "Don't hit me again." Norris slams the edge of her elbow 25 more times. After 2 hours, Bittaker prompts Norris to strangle the girl. He fashions a coat hanger around her neck, tightening with pliers, as Bittaker had always done. "Do it," Shirley Ledford begs. "Just kill me," are the last sounds on the tape. Driving while still dark in the residential Duchunage area, Bittaker throws little Shirley's remains in a front lawn ivy bed, wanting to read her reactions next day in the newsprint. Then he actually gets out and repositions Ledford's torn corpse with arms and legs spread eagle, displaying her welted, deeply cut wrists and ankles from her struggles against the binding ropes. They're sick, sick, sick. Disgusting. Bittaker played his tortured tapes and exhibited the endless snuff pictures of few people he had trusted at his motel, assuming that all men were excited with bondage pornography. The girls butchered by himself and Norris were also among the collection. It would all come back to haunt him. Sitting in his motel room, Bittaker fondled bottles of acid he recently brought, preparing for the next adventure. He was going to pick up Norris, abduct another girl, and experiment with the burning acid. But what he didn't know was that Norris had just been arrested with the purses of all the victims, along with other trophies, in his apartment, and he was talking loudly to make a deal of his own life. Investigation of her kidnapping and rape first led detectives to Norris, and Bittaker got arrested later that day. Inside Bittaker's room are 500 sex and bondage photos of girls, along with acid and ingredients for making the bizarre elephant tranquilizer. In his van, investigators find many of the tapes, including the Ledford massacre, although Bittaker allegedly buried the rest of the snuff photos and other items in the Forest Lawn Cemetery. Of Bittaker's Polaroids, 19 of the women posed are identified as girls who had been reported missing. Los Angeles County Sheriff Peter Bitches said that these teenagers were perhaps murdered as well. Bittaker told authorities that he merely given rides to the girls and paid them for sex, leaving them in good company of Roy Norris. When he asked if he felt remorse over the dead girls, Roy Norris said that he only felt sorry that he had to rat on his partner to save his own neck. What the... While in jail, Bittaker asked an inmate to draw a picture of a girl on the cell wall. Then he said to draw a coat hanger and a pair of pliers under the figure. Later, he sent around signed autographs as Pliers Bittaker. He called a federal agent from his cell to confess a rape and implicate Norris in a murder. Figuring that the mountain area where most of the girls were killed was a federal park, he would have a better chance under federal law rather than the state law. There was no death penalty under Fed statuses. Deputy District Attorney C. Ramsey Randolph called Bittaker and Norris two mutates from hell. I think that's supposed to be two mutants from hell. But as soon as the jury learned that even the epithet was an understatement, so hideous was the tape played in court of Shirley Ledford begging, crying, screaming in agony, with Bittaker commenting and laughing in the background, that the defence had a job to making the jury believe that he was not culpable. I could not have been on that jury. That would have broken me, I think. People in the courtroom cried, and all ran into the lobby until the tape evidence was finished playing. Bittaker actually smiled while the tape screamed. Kay couldn't help crying himself, telling the media later, "I just pictured those girls, how alone they were when they died." The young women who had been maced from her apartment area but had escaped from Norris and Bittaker was the only victim who had lived to testify. Regarding the other murders, no one had eyewitnesses. Prosecutor Stephen Kay told the jury that when the murders were committed in hell, you don't have angels for witnesses. Maybe we did have angels, but they were all murdered. When he agreed to take the witness stand, Bittaker cried, explaining his shock at the deaths of all the girls who he had generously given rides to at the murder mac. The screams from the girls on the tape were merely pillow talk from the girls to him. The tape, the physical evidence, and the direct testimony of 68 witnesses had told another story, and so did Bittaker's 250-page novel regarding many of the killings that he titled The Last Ride that the jury did not hear. The following day, Bittaker was no longer whiny and refused to tell where in Forest Lawn he buried the other snuff tapes and photos. As Randolph cross-examined him, Bittaker said that he thought normal rape was not a serious crime, adding, "I've been raped." The jury did not agree. After deliberating 3 days, they found him guilty on all 23 felony accounts, then heard arguments for the penalty phase of the trial. If the death penalty is not appropriate in this case, prosecutor Stephen Kay told the jury, then when will it ever be? Adding, "I really apologise to you all that I can ask for the death penalty. I wish I could ask you to do something. I wish I could ask you to do to this man what he did to these girls." Too right. Bittaker said that he felt nothing for what he had done and continued to blame everyone else for his predicament. Some photos in the first place. The jury, however, had no trouble blaming Bittaker for the murders, and in 90 minutes voted the death house. Torrance Superior Court Judge Thomas Fredericks confirmed the sentence and then added an additional 199 years, just in case the case conviction was ever reduced or revised. Good. During Roy Norris's trial, his parole officer testified that Norris never exhibited any remorse or compassion about his brutal, hideous behaviour towards the victims. The defendant appears compulsive in his needs to desire and inflict pain and torture upon women. Norris can be realistically regarded as an extreme sociopath whose depraved, grotesque pattern of behaviour is beyond rehabilitation. They should have said that in the first place and not let him out. On April the 28th, 1981, Roy Norris was sentenced to 45 years to life, avoiding capital punishment as part of his plea deal. Nearly the same monster as Bittaker. Norris was up for parole in 2009 but chose not to attend. He was again denied in 2019. Afterwards, while in prison, Bittaker was having fun suing judge declared him to be a vexatious litigant and no longer allowed to file suits without approval of the court. Bittaker said in later interviews that the only remorse was getting caught. Blyers Bittaker has now lived in San Quentin's death row for 34 years. Bittaker's other business ventures included his autographed murdered girls' autopsy reports for a price. Disgusting. In order to desensitize FBI agents, the Bittaker Norris audio tapes are unleashed at the academy recruits to show them what they may be dealing with when entering monsters disguised as humans. Chief investigator of the Bittaker Norris murders, 39-year-old Detective Paul Bynum, wrote in a 1987 suicide note that he could no longer live because of the slayings and worried that Bittaker and Norris would again be released into the world. On December the 16th, 2019, Lawrence Bittaker did the world a favour by dying in San Quentin State Prison at the age of 79. Good. Evil shit. Sorry. 2 months later, on February the 24th, Roy Norris died at California Medical Facility. Good. Glad he died too. That's the end of today's. It's gone on a bit longer than I thought it would. That story was probably the worst one I have ever read. Sorry, there's a fly now. It was disgusting, it was disturbing, and kinda wish I haven't read it, because I've now got to go to bed. And it's really wound me up. But I shall leave the link in the description of where this is from, and you can read it yourself if you want to. Yeah, it's obviously got some different things in there, but I didn't want to go into too much detail because it's not fair on the victims' families. It's disgusting, but if you want to read it, that's there for you. It's your choice then. I'm not forcing it on you. But yeah, I hope you're all doing well, and I shall see you very soon. Sooner than last time.